All right. Hello. Today we're going to build a basic firebase authentication application. All this will allow us to do is to have users that sign up, log in, as well as have a page for us to see all of the users that have ever visited our site. So let's start and build a skeleton. I have an empty folder here called firebase authentication. And I'm going to start to make my front end. So I'm going to do that with create React app. And I'm going to call that front end. I'm also going to go ahead and make a backend file. And inside of that, make an app.js. And we should have a little bit of some things going on. Let me just make sure that the front end is working still. Okay. So inside of our backend, let's go ahead and install some packages. So for this, I'm going to use Express. So I'm going to npm install our Express. I want to use body parser for any post requests that come into the backend. I'm going to use cores to get around cores errors. I am also going to, I think that's good for now. So let's go ahead and start with that. Let's make a getIgnore for our backend. And in our getIgnore, I'm going to go ahead and ignore our node modules, as well as an env file that I haven't created yet. And I might as well also go ahead and create that env file. Somehow I accidentally created these not in the backend. So I'm just going to go ahead and move everything into the backend. Whoops. Sure, my backend is the one that's selected. Okay. I think I accidentally put my package JSON into my node modules. Let's just go ahead and look. Oh, I'm not sure where it went. So I'm not sure. Let me just redo it. I'm going to cd into our backend, npm I express, body parser, as well as cores. Okay. So, not sure why I'm not seeing our package JSON. So I'm going to scrap this and just start again. I'm going to rm-rf our node modules so that I can just redo this. So let me take a look and I go, okay, npm init. Okay, so I've got my package JSON and I am going to npm I express body parser and cores. Okay. That's going to give me what I want. My front end is also now made. I'm not seeing my getIgnore in my backend, so I'm going to go ahead and make a getIgnore again. Sorry about these minor mistakes. Let's go ahead and ignore our node modules, as well as a .env. I'm going to save that. We'll see that those should be grayed out now. Doesn't look grayed out, so node modules. Maybe I'll do slash here. And let's make our env dot env. And it looks like those are all being tracked, but let's check. Git init. And now that we've initialized our Git and we do a Git status, we can see our backend and front end. Let's go ahead and add Git status. And this is all working. It looks like we have to remove a cached for our front end. So I'm just going to do that. Front end. Git status. I'm going to cd into my front end and remove the built-in Git. So I'm going to go back into here, cd into our front end. I'm going to check a Git here. I think I have a Git. So I'm going to say rm-rf.git. Now I'm going to remove the cache again. Force it. Git status, git add, and we get all of those front end folders as well. Front end, back end, skeleton. Great. So I'm tracking all these things, not my node modules and not my env file. Awesome. So let's keep building on our backend. Let's go ahead and make a folder called DB for database. And inside of my DB, I'm going to make a schema.sql file. And inside of here, we are going to create a new database. And I'm going to drop it first. So I'm going to say drop database if exists. And I'm going to call this firebase auth. And create database. And we'll say firebase auth. To access that this database, we have to connect it. So we're going to say firebase auth again. And then let's create our tables. So I'm going to say drop table if exists. And I'm going to say users, because I want a users table. And let's go ahead and create our table for users. Table users. And my users are going to have an ID, which is going to be something that I'm going to take that we're going to get back eventually from our Firebase. So I'm just going to have this so I have something to point to it. So I'm going to get our varchar and I'm going to say this is a primary key. And I'm going to have an email that is a varchar. Great. I think that's all of the tables I'm going to add for now. So let's go ahead and see if we can run this command. So I'm going to say psql-f and go to the relative file and run it. And it throws a little error because I'm using tables. It should be table. Let's try again. Okay. Syntax error. If exists. I need that extra S there. I'm sorry about my spelling. Okay, and we have a cannot drop table users because other objects are depending on it. Interesting. I don't have anything depending on it. Now, there is a chance that I've already made a table called this in the past, so I'm just going to call this something like demo. And there we go. To-dos author ID. So it looks like it's looking at something totally different than our table. So maybe I've called this. Let's just go ahead and add example. I know it's a long table name. Okay, and I'm gonna psql-f backend db. Well, this is interesting. What if I just drop this for now? Comment this out. Okay, that's interesting. Let's take a look at our PSQL tool and see if we even have this database. So I'm gonna call this long name. So it's definitely breaking. So I don't know. Okay, let's see what's wrong. Hmm. Very, very odd. Feels like this isn't even in the right location, this terminal. Okay. Yeah. That's so interesting. It's acting like there's more code in here than there is. I'm gonna pause this video. All right, so the devils are in the detail. I think this is because of this capital C, which is really an annoying error. Okay, now it's working. Great. So we've got our basic database here. Let's keep moving. Let's make a schema, an index file for us to connect into this database. So I'm going to make that by doing index.js. And all this is going to do is use .env. So I'm going to require, whoops, .env.config. So I should also install this into my backend. So npm.env, npm install .env. And let's go ahead and also, oh, we also need PG promise to connect. So let's go ahead and do PG promise. And we're going to say const PGP is equal to require PG promise. invoke that, empty options object, const db, PGP, and we'll invoke that and we'll call process.env dot database URL. So I'm doing it here so this will be easier to host later and I won't have to change things. Module.exports db. And let's also go ahead and update our env file to include that database URL. So I'm going to go into here and I'm going to say database URL. That's going to be Postgres, localhost 5432 / and then the name that I'm calling this project. So Firebase auth demo examples. Quite a mouthful. And I'm also going to go ahead and put my port here as well. And I'm going to set that to be 3001. Okay. And while I'm here, since I've already run my, well, I'm going to go ahead and comment these lines out so that they don't get in the way when I do push this to production. Okay. Great. So now we've got our database set up. Let's go ahead and start building on our app. So app is going to require express. So we're going to say const express is require express. We're going to get our body parser in here. And our cores. Whoops. Cores. Let's also require .env again. Because we're going to want to read that port. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and say const port. And this is going to be process.env.port. I also just want to make sure that that's what I did here. Perfect. Okay. All right. So we've got our port. Let's go ahead and get our app going. Express, new instance of Express. I'm going to go ahead and run app.listen. Down here, this is going to take in our port. And I'm going to just give a friendly little message. It tells me that I'm listening. So let's go ahead and just log listening on port. So that should be 3001. Okay, so I'm not going to have a lot of routes for this today. I'm going to have some user routes and all that, but first I should configure things a bit more. So I'm going to say app.use. I want to use cores. I want to use body parser. That URL encoded with extended to true, as well as my body parser for JSON. Okay, great. And so let's go ahead and make a route. So specifically, I want to do every time I go to a user's API. So every time I say app.use and I go /API/users, I want to go to my user's router, which I haven't written yet, but I will in a second. I'm just going to comment that out for now. And I'm also just going to add a little error handling. So in the event that I don't hit a successful route, I'll have error, request, response, and next. And I will console log my error. And let's give some information back to the user. So I'll say if error status. I want to res.status error.status and send back the JSON of that error. Else, let's go ahead and give it a status of 500 and send back that error. Okay. I just think I have a small mistake. Great. Okay. So let's go ahead and start to build out those user routes that we said we would. So let's do that. Let's make a new folder called routes. And I'm going to make a new file in here for our users.js. And let's go ahead and require express. I'm going to call this users require express. And specifically express is router. And we will module.exports right now our users. And this is what I'll be requiring in here in order to use my router. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that higher up. So I'm going to say const. I'm going to call this user router. And that's going to be from our routes at users. So I can comment that back in now. Okay, and let me just be running our backend here. So I'm going to use nodemon to auto refresh the server every time I make a change. And it looks like it's working okay. Let's go ahead and create some queries for our backend as well. So we're going to do queries. And these are all going to be user-based queries for me. So let's go ahead and do that first. So I'm going to make my file, and I'm going to call this users.js. And inside of here, I want to first require my connection to my database. So this is require of /tb/index.js. And I want to be able to do two things in this app. I want to be able to create a new user, and I also want to be able to go out and grab all of the users that have ever signed up. So let's make one called create user. This is going to be an async. So we can use async await. This has a request, a response, and a next. And let's add a nice try catch. And we are going to use our DB object here. So I'm going to have a user. I don't need anything here actually. So I'm just going to say await. And I'm going to say db.none. And it's time to write a little bit of SQL. So we're going to say insert into users, the ID and the email, the values, and we will say of ID and email. And the second argument for this is just going to be our request.body. So our request.body is going to have an ID and an email associated to it. Okay, after that, if this is successful, we're going to go ahead and send back a positive response. So I'm just going to send back a nice message that says new user created. Okay. If this doesn't work and this throws an error, I'm just going to call next and pass in our error. Great. Let's make a module.exports and go ahead and export our create user. And while we're here, I'm also just going to do a fetch users. Const fetch all users. And this will be the same type of thing. It's going to be async. It's going to be a request, a response, and a next. And we will run a nice try catch. And for that, we want to collect all of our users. So I'm going to say users, and I'm going to await our db.any. So any amount of responses, and we will just select, I guess I should capitalize it, select star from users. And then let's go ahead and send back some JSON, where I'll pass back our users as well as a message that says all users. In the event that there is an error, we will go ahead and call next and pass in our error. And let's export this as well. So we'll say fetch all users. Great. So let's go ahead and import these into our routes. So back in the routes, we will say const create user and fetch all users. I think that's what I called it, right? Fetch all users. Let's make that plural. And this is from our queries. Great. So now we can just say users dot post. So any kind of post request we can call to create a user. So I'm just going to say slash, and we can call create user. And on a get request, to get all the users, we will call to fetch all users. Okay, and it breaks. So let's see what's broke. Modules.exports is DB is not, modules is not defined. So let's check. Maybe I've misspelled something. Module.exports, maybe. Oops. Module.exports. Okay, let's look at this error. This is in our index file. I made the same mistake there as well. Okay. This says user is not defined. So this is probably has to do with the fact that I'm calling it users. And now it's running. So let's go ahead and make sure that everything's working. So I'm gonna go ahead and blow this up. And let's go to 3001 and try API/users. And we should get an empty array. And we can go ahead and add somebody using Postman. So waiting for that to open up. And this is good just to test that everything works. So I'm going to say 3001. We'll make a post request with the body. And the body we said we wanted was a ID. So I'm going to say 1. And let's go ahead and add an email. And I'm going to call this Corey@Corey.com. And we'll make our post request. And we get this error, but that's because this is not the right route. This needs to be /API/users. And we get new user created. So let's go ahead and make a GET request for all of our users and see that it works. And now we have this query at query. So Postman seems to be working. I'm just gonna leave that for now. Okay, great. So now we've got our kind of basic backend. Let's go ahead and start to build the skeleton of the front end. So first things first, I'm gonna start working in the front end area. So let's go ahead and npm start to get our front end going. And let's start to organize this. So I'm gonna go into my app.js, and I don't need all this stuff. So I'm gonna remove it. Okay, while that's loading, oops, let's just go ahead and do a little hello world, make sure this is working. It's still starting development. My computer's a little bit slow. Okay, well, while that's happening, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this logo, not interested. We see our hello world, so that's working. Cool. Inside of our source, let's go ahead and make some components. I'm gonna make a navbar. I'm gonna make a login. I'm gonna make a sign up. And I'm going to make a home. And lastly, I'm going to make a user's index. Okay, so I've got all of these. Because I want this to be a multi-page application, I am going to have to install React Router DOM. So I'm going to cd back into our front end and npm I React Router DOM. And I'm going to use Axios as well. So I'm going to install both of those packages. Okay, so while that's happening, I'm just going to pretend that I have those. And I'm going to go to my index.js. And I'm going to import our browser router. And I'm going to import it as router from our React router DOM. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap our whole app in that. Great. So now we have that wrapped. And this is going to allow us to do our routing. And let's go ahead and do our navbar. And I'm going to import React from React. I thought I had a hotkey. Maybe I don't. Oh, I do. Okay. So for our navbar, and I'm going to go ahead and return the nav. And I want to have links, so I'm going to import that as well. Specifically, I'm going to import the nav link just to get a little bit more precise of what it is from React Router DOM. And let's go ahead and make our links. So nav link to, and we'll say slash, and this will be to home. And I'm going to throw an exact on that for when I do want to do some styling. Okay, let's do another nav link to, and we will say to users. I'll say slash users. And this will be show all users. And then let's also just do a login and a sign up. And just make these match. Great. Let's go ahead and put that inside of our app. Navbar. And let's import it. Great. And there we go. So it's kind of a hot mess. Let's just add like the tiniest styling component right now. So I'm going to make a folder called CSS. And I'm going to make a file in there called navbar.css. And I'm just going to directly do the element. So nav, I'm going to say display. Let's go ahead and display flex. And I'll justify content space around just to get a little bit nicer. And in our navbar component, we can go ahead and actually import that style. Just import css/navbar.css. Great. So we should see those changes. Great. So we've got a few things there. I really don't like this capital P. So that's just a minor change. All right. So our navbar looks good. Let's go ahead and create some routes. Okay, let's go make the other components. So let's go ahead and make home, import React from React, export default home. This really isn't going to do much. I just want this to return a big H1 that says home component, right? Because I want anybody to be able to access that. So let's go add that in our app for a route. So let's import routes, import route from React router DOM. And we'll say at this route, path, I'll say exact path for this one of slash. We want to show the home component. So we'll just import that like so. Great. So we have our home component and we can leave it. Oops. Great. Let's go add a few more. So for our users, let's do that. Import React from React. Export default users index. I want to go get all of my users, right? So every time I load this page, I want to go grab all the users and I'm going to set them to a users variable in my state. And then I'm going to iterate through that. So I'm going to go ahead and use state and use effect. And let's do it. So we're going to say const and we're going to have our users and our set users. And that's going to be use state. And I'm going to set that up, initialize that as an empty array. Okay. And I'm going to make a use effect. That's going to go out there. And I want this to run just the one time when it first mounts. So I'm going to replicate component demount. And I'm going to make a fetch users function. And I'm going to allow this to have async await in it. And this is going to go out and grab my users. So I'm going to say let response equal await. I'm going to call Axios. This is going to take an object. I have to import Axios. Axios from Axios. And I'm going to list my method is get. And my URL is going to be /API/users. Now I need this to point to my local host if I want. So I will deal with that in just a second. And then once I get my response back, I'm going to set my users to my res.data.users as specified from our backend. And I'm going to just go ahead and call fetch users first thing in the hook. Okay, I'm going to do a basic just showing of the users. It's not going to be too much, so I'm just going to return. It's going to be some div. Let's make an H1 that says all users. All users. You are seeing this if logged in. That's the ultimate goal. And then let's go ahead and just make a UL with an LI of users. So I'll say users.map per each user. Let's go ahead and just return an LI where we look at the user.email. And I will have a key for my user.id. Great. So I mentioned that we want to get this from localhost. So let's see why. Let's see what happens. So if I set up another route, whoops. And inside of here, I do my user index, and I make this for the path of, let's say, /users. All right, let's see what happens. So right now we have one user, but when we see here, we don't get anything, and we get this 404 not found. And that's because it's looking at localhost 3000 instead of our localhost 3001. Now, this is part of where our backend is currently living. So right now it's living on localhost, but someday we want it to live on Heroku. So I'm going to add a little utility that is going to tell me where I am. So inside of my front end, I'm going to create a folder called util. And I'm going to create a file inside of there called API URL.js. And I'm just going to write a little helper function that's going to be called API URL. And all this is going to do is it's going to look at where my window is and what the host name is inside of the window. So if my window at location.hostname, if this is equal, let's say to localhost, then I want to have http://localhost 3001. If not, I need to have something. I'm going to put an empty string for now, but we'll have to update this again when we actually host our backend on Heroku. So I'm going to leave that like that for now. And inside of our user index, I'm going to import that to help us. So I'm going to go ahead and import our API URL from our util folder, which is currently in our front end. Let's put this in our source. Okay. So /util/API URL. And I'm just going to get it. So I'm going to say const API is equal to API URL and invoke it. And I'm just going to go ahead and put that in front. So instead of regular quotes, I'm going to put backticks so that I can put in a variable. I'm going to save that. And with that minor change, we should be able to see now we are getting our user. So we've got our home, our user. Let's go make our login and our sign up. Okay, so I've got a lot of things open. Let's Just close some of these things. So my login and sign up are going to be very, very similar. Let's do sign up first. So I'm going to import React from React. I know I'm going to need Axios for when I actually go to make the user. I also know that I'm going to have a form here, and I'm going to have controlled inputs. So I'm going to use state. I'm also going to do one more thing where I want to, once somebody signed up, I want to push them over to the home page, like, because you're here now, you're just pushed in. So I'm also going to have to import our use history hook in order to do so. Okay. And let's go ahead and do this. So I'm going to go for default, my sign up. It's not going to take in anything, but we are going to get an email and a set email. And that's going to be from our use state. It's going to be empty, and we're going to do the same thing with password. This is a capital P. Great. Let's go ahead and get our history from use history. Great. And again, I will need, eventually when I get that new user, I'm going to have to make a request to our backend. So I'm also going to need that API URL helper that I wrote. So we're going to say API URL from /util/API URL. And I'm going to just go ahead and make that right away too. Great. Okay, so let's go ahead and make our sign up page. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a React fragment. I'm going to have an H1. It's going to say sign up page. And this is just going to be a form. Going to make an input. Oops. Inputs are self-closing tags. I don't know what that's doing. And let's go. Oh, I think it got confused. Okay, there we go. So by default, it has a type of text, so I'm not going to worry about that. But I am going to give it a placeholder and whatnot. So I'm going to say placeholder, and this is going to say email. Let's go ahead and give it a value. And this says I want it to always be our email. Let's give it a onChange. So when any change happens, it's going to fire an event, and we are going to set our email to our event.currentTarget.value. Okay, our password is going to be really similar, so I'm just going to zip that down, call this password. I'm going to give it a type property, though, of password, because I don't want people to be able to see what I'm typing. Our value will be password, and our onChange will be set password. Also, we can give it an autocomplete feature. So I'm going to say autocomplete, and I'm going to just make that on. Okay, so what we care about is also on submit of this form. So on submit, let's go ahead and fire some function called handle submit. So let's make that function. Handle submit takes in an event, and we want to prevent the default so that our page doesn't refresh. We will want to do something at some point. So sign up with Firebase and send results to our backend, right? At some point, but we don't have that. So that's going to be just like left as a to-do. And then we're going to history dot push r to slash. Since these will be asynchronous, I'm going to go ahead and do async. And I'm going to just do a nice try catch. And this will be inside of the try. And I could handle our catch some way. So yeah, let's handle an error. So let's add another thing of our state. We'll say for error and set error. And we'll start that as null. So if there's a error, let's just go ahead and set our error to be our error.message so that the user can see it. And then we'll just do a little bit of logic right before our form that says like, if there is an error, we will go ahead and say, we'll just have a div there that has the error inside of it. Otherwise, whoops. Otherwise, let's just set this to null. Okay, so we're only going to see that if there is an error. And let's just, okay, let's hook this up into our app. So we'll go back into our app. And we will say on login, or we did sign up, sorry. We want to actually show the sign up. So when somebody tries to sign up, we see this page, do something. I don't have a way to submit the form. So let's go ahead and add that real quick. Just add a button, type submit. And we'll just throw the word sign up in here. Okay, let's try that again. Must be a small error here. Oh, I don't know why that happened again. This React fragment's being annoying. Okay. Okay, so we'll say test at test.com, test, sign up, and we would get pushed. But nothing actually happened. We didn't really sign up. It just pretends like it did, right? We still see that our only user in there is the Corey at Corey. All right, so let's do the same kind of thing for our login. I think we can borrow a lot of this code. So this may not be the greatest practice of all time, but I'm just going to grab it. I'm going to paste it. I don't think I need an Axios, but we will see. I don't think I need a URL. My error, password, history. Okay, I'm going to remove that. Our handle submit. It's going to be some kind of sign in with Firebase. Then change route. And we will call this login page. I'll use the word log here. Okay. And this should say log in. And let's see. We'll add that to app. For our login. Log in, whoops. These will both be login. And our login page needs to have a better name. It shouldn't be called sign up. Okay. Let's go ahead and check. So we've got our login page now. Test, login. There we have our sign up page, login page, show all users, as well as our home. And so this looks like a pretty good stopping point for now. This is the skeleton of our app.